Imagine a young woman, just full of life and ambition, moving to a new city to chase her dreams. That was Akansha Sharma.
It's a story that is just heartbreaking.
She had everything going for her. A thriving career, a loving family, a close circle of friends.
Really bright future.
But behind that facade of success, a dark secret lurked, a toxic relationship that would ultimately lead to her tragic demise.
Yeah, a story that gets to you.
This bright, vibrant young woman, just 25 years old, was found murdered in her Lucknow apartment in 2018. And the most unsettling detail, there was no sign of forced entry suggesting she knew her attacker.
It's a detail that immediately sends chills down your spine, isn't it? It speaks to a level of betrayal that's almost too painful to comprehend.
Absolutely. So let's start by painting a clear picture of who Akansha was. What can you tell us about her life before this tragedy struck?
Well, Akansha was originally from Kanpur, but had moved to Lucknow to pursue her career aspirations. She was a successful corporate professional known for her intelligence drive and just infectious energy. Everyone who knew her describes her as someone who lit up a room. She was close to her family, deeply loved by her friends, and seemed to have a truly bright future ahead of her.
It makes it all the more heartbreaking to think about what happened. But to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to delve into another aspect of Akansha's life, her relationship with Rohit Malhotra.
Yes, this is where the story takes a darker turn. Initially, their relationship seemed like a typical romance. They met through mutual friends, and Rohit, a young entrepreneur himself, appeared supportive of Akansha's goals.
But as we often see in these cases, appearances can be deceiving.
You're absolutely right. Over time, Rohit's behavior became increasingly controlling. He'd question Akansha's whereabouts, accuse her of prioritizing work over their relationship, and fly into a rage if she spent time with male colleagues.
So classic red flags for a toxic relationship. And it's important to point out that these controlling behaviors often start subtly, making it difficult for the victim to recognize the danger.
Exactly. It's a slow erosion of boundaries, often disguised as concern or care. The abuser might start by checking their partner's phone just to make sure they're safe, or try to isolate them from friends and family under the guise of protecting them.
It's like a spider web, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get tangled up before you even realize you're trapped. And in Akansha's case, it seems she eventually did try to break free.
She did. As the arguments intensified and Rohit's possessiveness grew, Akansha realized she needed to get out. She made the incredibly difficult decision to break up with him.
But sadly, as we know, that wasn't the end of it. Rohit refused to accept her decision.
Right. He bombarded her with calls and messages, pleading for her to come back. He showed up at her workplace unannounced, creating scenes and embarrassing her in front of colleagues. This type of relentless pursuit, this refusal to respect boundaries, is a hallmark of stalking, a form of harassment that can have devastating psychological effects on the victim.
It's terrifying to think about the constant fear Akansha must have been living with. And it's a reminder that stalking is not a romantic gesture. It's a serious crime with potentially deadly consequences.
Absolutely. Stalking often escalates over time, and in some cases, as we see here, it can be a precursor to violence.
So let's talk about that fateful night in June 2018. Can you walk us through what happened?
On the evening of June 12th, Akansha's roommate returned to their apartment and made a horrifying discovery. She found Akansha lying lifeless on the floor, the victim of a brutal strangulation.
And this is where that chilling detail we mentioned earlier comes into play, the lack of forced entry.
Precisely. The absence of any signs of a break-in immediately suggested that Akansha knew her attacker, that she had perhaps let them into her apartment willingly.
And given Rohit's obsessive behavior and refusal to accept the breakup, he immediately became the prime suspect.
Yes, the police already had reports from Akansha's friends and family about Rohit's controlling behavior and his desperate attempts to win her back, so he was certainly on their radar.
Okay, so let's delve into the investigation now. What kind of evidence did the police gather that linked Rohit to the crime?
The investigators started by piecing together a timeline of events leading up to Akansha's death. They interviewed neighbors who reported hearing loud arguments coming from Akansha's apartment in the hours before she was found.
That aligns with what we know about the volatile nature of their relationship. Were there any eyewitnesses who could place Rohit at the scene?
Yes, a crucial piece of evidence came from the building's security guard. He not only confirmed hearing the arguments, but also identified Rohit from security camera footage. He had seen Rohit entering the building around the estimated time of the murder.
So we have Rohit placing himself at the scene of the crime. What other evidence did the investigators uncover?
Well, this is where the digital footprint becomes crucial. When the police examined Akansha's phone, they discovered a series of threatening messages from Rohit.
And what kind of messages are we talking about?
Some of them were pleading for her to return, but others were far more sinister. One message sent just hours before Akansha's death read, "If I can't have you, no one else will." It sent a chill down the spines of everyone involved in the investigation.
It's a chilling reminder that words can be weapons, and in this case, those words seem to foreshadow a tragic outcome.
You're right. And this digital evidence, combined with the eyewitness account and the lack of forced entry, was already building a strong case against Rohit. But the investigators weren't done yet. They wanted to solidify their case with irrefutable physical evidence.
And that's where forensic science comes into play, right?
Exactly. The forensic team meticulously examined the crime scene, and their findings would prove to be the final nail in Rohit's coffin.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive. We'll explore the forensic evidence that sealed Rohit's fate and delve into the complexities of the trial that followed.
You know, when we left off, we were about to uncover the forensic evidence that played a crucial role in this case. The investigators, they meticulously collected samples from the crime scene, hoping to find something that would definitively link Rohit to Akansha's murder. And they weren't disappointed.
It's almost like a scene from a crime drama, isn't it? Those tiny invisible traces left behind that can tell such a powerful story.
Oh.
So what did the forensic analysis reveal?
The results were damning. They found traces of Rohit's DNA on Akansha's clothing. Imagine that, a silent testament to his presence at the scene.
It's chilling to think about, isn't it? Those tiny molecules invisible to the naked eye, holding the key to unraveling this horrific crime.
It's a testament to the power of science, isn't it? And it gets even more compelling. Remember, Akansha had been strangled with a scarf. When the forensic team examined the scarf, they found something that sealed Rohit's fate: his DNA.
So we have eyewitness accounts placing him at the scene, threatening messages on Akansha's phone, and now his DNA on both her clothing and the murder weapon. It's starting to feel like an open and shut case, isn't it?
It certainly was a mountain of evidence for the prosecution to present. But remember, our legal system is based on the presumption of innocence. It was up to the prosecution to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Rohit was guilty of Akansha's murder.
And that's where the trial comes in, right? A battle of legal arguments, expert testimonies, and ultimately a jury's decision on whether Rohit would be held accountable for his actions.
Exactly. And this trial captured the attention of the nation. People were horrified by the brutality of the crime and captivated by the legal drama that unfolded in the courtroom.
So let's dive into that courtroom, shall we? Walk us through the key moments of the trial. What was the prosecution's strategy in presenting their case?
The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, presenting the evidence we've discussed, the eyewitness accounts, the security footage, the threatening messages, and of course the damning DNA evidence. They painted a picture of Rohit as a possessive and controlling boyfriend who, driven by rage and jealousy, refused to accept the breakup and ultimately took Akansha's life in a fit of jealous fury.
It's a story that sadly we hear all too often, isn't it? The toxic mix of possessiveness, jealousy, and violence that can lead to such tragic consequences.
Yeah, right. And the prosecution did a powerful job of highlighting these themes, arguing that Rohit's actions were not a spontaneous act of passion, but a calculated and cold-blooded murder.
And what about the defense? What was their strategy in trying to counter this overwhelming evidence?
The defense team faced an uphill battle, to say the least. They attempted to portray Rohit as a heartbroken lover who had acted impulsively, driven by grief and despair over the breakup. They argued that there was no premeditation, that the murder was a crime of passion committed in a moment of uncontrollable rage.
But with all the evidence stacked against him, that must have been a tough sell.
It was. The prosecution skillfully dismantled that defense, planning out the pattern of controlling behavior, the stalking, the threatening messages sent hours before the murder. They argued that this was not a case of a heartbroken lover, but of a man who felt entitled to control and possess his partner, even to the point of taking her life when she dared to assert her independence.
It's a sobering reminder that love should never be about control or possession. It should be about respect, equality, and freedom.
Absolutely. And the jury, after hearing all the evidence and arguments, had to decide whether they believed Rohit's actions were premeditated or a result of a sudden uncontrollable rage.
So what was the verdict? What did the jury decide after weeks of testimony and deliberation?
In early 2019, the jury delivered their verdict. They found Rohit Malhotra guilty of murder.
Guilty of murder. A powerful statement, a recognition that Akansha's life was taken unjustly, that her right to freedom and independence was brutally violated.
Yes, and the judge in his closing remarks condemned Rohit's actions as a gross betrayal of trust, emphasizing the need for strict punishment in cases of intimate partner violence.
A verdict that, brings a sense of justice. But it can't erase the pain of Akansha's loss. Her family, her friends, They're left to grapple with the unimaginable, the void left behind by a life cut tragically short.
It's a reminder that justice, while important, can never truly heal the wounds inflicted by such a senseless act of violence.
And as we reflect on this case, it's crucial to remember that Akansha's story is not an isolated incident. Sadly, it reflects a much larger societal problem.
You're absolutely right. Akansha's case, while tragic, sparked a national conversation in India about the prevalence of toxic relationships, domestic violence, and the urgent need for change.
So let's talk about that need for change. What can we do as a society to prevent more stories like Akansha's from happening? What needs to shift?
Well, I think one crucial aspect is challenging those deep-rooted societal norms that contribute to this problem. We need to stop romanticizing possessiveness and jealousy. Those dangerous notions that, if he's jealous, it means he really loves you. Love should never be about control or possession.
It's amazing how those toxic ideas can linger even when we think we've progressed as a society. We need to redefine what healthy relationships look like, emphasize the importance of respect, equality, and open communication.
Absolutely. And we need to empower women to recognize their worth, to set boundaries, and to walk away from unhealthy relationships without feeling guilty or ashamed. Too often, societal pressures, family expectations, or even just the fear of being alone can trap people in dangerous situations.
It's about creating a culture where walking away from a toxic relationship is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness, where seeking help is encouraged, not stigmatized.
Exactly. And this is where education plays a vital role. We need to start early teaching young people about healthy relationships, consent, and respect. It's about breaking those cycles of abuse before they even start.
And it's not just about education. It's about ensuring that our legal system is properly equipped to handle these cases, to protect victims, and to hold perpetrators accountable.
Couldn't agree more. We need to strengthen our laws, improve police training, and ensure that victims of domestic violence and stalking feel safe and supported when they come forward.
Akansha's case highlighted the devastating consequences of ignoring the warning signs, of failing to address the root causes of this violence.
Her story serves as a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a safer world.
So to our listeners out there, we urge you to take this deep dive to Heart's Light. Educate yourselves about the signs of toxic relationships, challenge those harmful societal norms, support organizations working to prevent domestic violence.
And if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out for help. There are resources available, and you don't have to go through this alone.
Remember, even small actions can make a difference. Speaking up against a sexist joke, calling out a friend who's exhibiting controlling behavior, supporting a local shelter, it all adds up.
Akansha's legacy lives on in the efforts of those who are fighting to create a world where love isn't twisted, where relationships are built on respect and equality.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Akansha Sharma murder case. It's a story that stays with you, a reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and action.
And remember to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into the complexities of human behavior, the dark side of love, and the pursuit of justice.